I mentioned earlier, we're going to continue in a series on friendship. And you know, you wonder about friends and you wonder about the people that you meet and how they affect your life. And let's just be honest, what we sometimes think of other people that surround us. So I have a little poem this morning about that. I'll read before we get started to get us in the right place. I was shocked, confused, bewildered as I entered heaven's door. Not by the beauty of it all, nor the lights or its decor, but it was the folks in heaven who made me sputter and gasp. The thieves, the liars, the sinners, the alcoholics, and the trash. There stood the kid from 7th grade who swiped my lunch money twice. Next to him was my old neighbor who never said anything nice. Herb, who I always thought was rotting in hell, was sitting pretty on cloud 9, looking incredibly well. I nudged Jesus. What's the deal? I would love to hear your take. How did all these sinners get up here? God must have made a mistake. And why is everyone so quiet, so somber? Give me a clue. Hush, child, he said. They're all unshocked. No one thought they'd be seeing you. Okay. So a little trip back to reality there, right? We just never know. But keeping friends around us, people to influence us, people who do influence us, that's what this message series is about. So this morning, I simply titled it Iron 2, last week being Iron 1, I guess. So we're back in the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, the 23rd chapter, verses 13 through 18. If you want to turn there in your Bibles, we'll be getting there here pretty quick. But I can't express enough how important it is to have true friends, trustworthy, honest people in your life. People who are beside you in tough times, who are beside you in the good and even the great times. And notice that I said twice there that they're right there. They're beside you. They're not in front of you. They're not behind you. They're people who are beside you. Yes, at times they may be guiding you, so you may think that they are ahead of you, but true friends aren't. True friends are a part of what you do. They're a part of who you are, who you become in a way. They're literally beside you in life. And I am encouraging you in this series, and I believe that God does it all throughout His Word, to look for and to appreciate those friends. First of all, last week we talked about friends that just challenge you. Friends that step up and they ask you to do something in their life, or you do something in their life, as Samuel chose David, is what we talked about last week. And this week, we're going to talk about a friend to help you find God's strength, to find the spiritual side of your life, to guide you in that way. It's incredible when it happens. If you have had that blessing in your life, then you know what I mean. If you've had someone that stepped up, you know how awesome it feels. And that's what we're going to talk about as we go through this. And then, last but not least, we're going to cap off the series in 2 weeks. Because we're not going to be here next week. That doesn't mean you don't come. That means you do come, because you need to support each other. Okay? It doesn't matter whether I know or not. All right? God knows, and you need to support each other. So we'll cap it off in 2 weeks, and with a friend in your life that shares the truth, even when it hurts. Okay? So you have 2 weeks to prepare for that one. All right? Because if you may have had one of those in your life too. But the point of this series are the relationships that we have, the friends that we need to keep in our lives or to seek in our lives. Because they, as we talked about last week, ultimately shape our life story. Sure, our choices do, but one of our choices are who we have closest to us and our friendships. Before we get good friends, we have to find God's strength. So I want to point out, as I believe I was talking with Julie about this yesterday, that these friends that we share and their strengths in our lives. Last week, someone to challenge you and to be there for you. This week, somebody to guide you spiritually and to strengthen you. They may not be the same people. In fact, the names that came to mind in this series for me, when I looked back into the mirror myself, they weren't the same people. The people that guided me and were the rock for me and challenged me and helped me spiritually weren't always the same as the ones that I may have been thinking about or even mentioning last week. Because some of the friends in particular that came to mind in last week's message would not and do not fill a spiritual place in my life. We don't always do spiritual things. We don't talk spiritually. In fact, I don't really know that I would go to some of them with a spiritual question. But yet I have friends in my life that I would not hesitate to go to with a spiritual issue. And you say, well, those aren't different, but they can be. They may not be, but they very well can be. So you may have had a friend last week that came to mind, and this week it's a different friend, or maybe there's a void for you there that you need to pray about. They don't have to be the same person. So, who is it in your life who will help you when you are in the middle of weakness or maybe temptation? Who is the spiritual guide? Who is God's voice for you in your life? Who takes you beyond yourself spiritually? Who could you ask a question to about God? And maybe they would have the answer, maybe not, but you would feel like that's your go-to. Who would that be? Well, anyone, and I mean that, anyone who is true to themselves and true to God will freely admit that you need somebody in your life. You need someone to go to. The people that seem to get themselves into the most trouble either don't think that they need anyone. I can take care of this by myself. God hasn't been a part of my life, and I don't need anybody that wants to tell me about it. Well, we could do the Dr. Phil and say, so how's that working for you? But I think we know. Not that this someone that you may go to will always have all the answers, because no one but God does. But is there someone there for you to lean on? To help you and to guide you? Because David did have that. And that's what we're going to study today. David, if you're a guy and you want to read about guy things, David's a guy. I mean, he's a guy. I mean, he hangs out with the boys. We're going to read a little bit about that. You know, he goes to battle. He does guy things. I mean, you think, man, David, you're a guy. But David was a ladies' man. Okay? I mean, he had that too. We know all about that. And David was also known as a man who was after God's own heart. God loved David for his heart. So you can see why David has this aura about him that's almost bigger than life. But he made tons of mistakes, but we don't think about that because this is what David represented. But even that David needed and leaned on and had the kind of friend that we all need. Even David had that. So I want to read about it. The setup today, there's a little bit of setup. Most of the time in the Old Testament there is. But David and a few hundred men, I think eventually we find out, I think there were 600. And it kept increasing. All right, that tells you something about David. But there were a few hundred men, and they were just doing their thing. Okay, you remember David was anointed. We talked about that last week. He was always just playing the harp and taking care of Saul, and then Saul started chucking spears at him, and the whole thing got ugly, and David went off on his own. But David was still David, and he kept fighting for Israel. He kept doing what he knew was right, even though he had to watch his back, because the king, who was not supposed to be that way, was that way. And he was going crazy, and he was trying to kill him, and all kinds of nasty things were happening. So David had grown tired of that. He didn't want to just be the easy target. He was out protecting Israel with a few hundred men. He was doing the exact same thing that the king was already doing, except David had a lot fewer guys. And David had to watch out for his own king, who wants to kill him, and we'll read about that. And he was being chased by them. Now the town that he's going to mention is Keilah. It's a town in the Israel community. It had just been attacked by the Philistines. And David and his men went there. They heard about this. They went, they beat the Philistines. They took the Philistines' livestock. They took everything, and they gave it back to the people of Keilah. Now, what we don't read right before that is the leaders of the town turned David in. They ratted out on him. They told Saul, hey, he's down here if you want to come get him. Okay? So Saul now knows where David is. And that's where we pick it up in chapter 23, verses 13 through 18. So David and his men, about 600 of them now, left Keilah and began roaming the countryside. Word soon reached Saul that David had escaped, so he didn't go to Keilah after all. David now stayed in the strongholds of the wilderness and in the hill country of Ziph. Saul hunted him day after day, but God didn't let Saul find him. One day near Horesh, David received the news that Saul was on his way to Ziph to search for him and kill him. Jonathan went to find David and encourage him to stay strong in his faith with God. Don't be afraid, Jonathan reassured him. My father will never find you. You are going to be the king of Israel, and I will be next to you, as my father Saul is well aware. So the two of them renewed their solemn pact before the Lord. Then Jonathan returned home, while David stayed at Horesh. May God bless the reading of His Word this morning. Now, I know that there are a lot of books out there, and I read a whole lot of books, but I've said it before, and I know I'm going to say it again. If you want to sit down and just read good stories, read your Bible. I mean, I'm going to tell you, there's certain books I'll tell you that get kind of, hard to understand, or like, really, what is this? But you want to read some good, just keep reading after that. Today, you go home this afternoon, pick up right where we left off and just keep reading. You won't find any soap opera on all week long that's any better than what you're going to read right in there, word after word. I mean, it is a tremendous history of what happened day after day. But in that we just read, in those verses 13 through 18 that we just read, I want to call attention in particular to verse 16. And I will tell you that as I studied this and went through this, I got my fine-tipped little red marker out and underlined in my Bible verse 16. And verse 16 read, Jonathan went to find David and encourage him to stay strong in his faith in God. Jonathan, Saul's son, whom eventually was killed in battle beside his father, went to find his friend David, renew their pact, their oath together, and to tell David and encourage him. Jonathan went to find David, went to find him. That meant he didn't know exactly where he was. David didn't come strolling through town and Jonathan go, oh man, there was something I wanted to tell him. He went to find him. He sought him out. I don't know exactly what it took back then to make your way through the desert, to make your way through the wilderness, But I'm quite sure it wasn't as easy as if I decided that I wanted to visit someone in Champaign today, that I get in my air-conditioned car and I say, it'd take me about 2 hours and I'm there. I'm not quite so sure it was that easy. Jonathan went to find David and encourage him. Now, if we just stopped right there, you would think that he showed up and he said, man, I hear you're doing a good thing. I know those people of Keilah, man, they sold you out to dad. Ugh, that's tough. But you're doing a great thing. You're rescuing the people of Israel. I love it, man. Good job. If we stopped right there, that's what we would think. That Jonathan went, found David, and encouraged him. But that isn't where it stops. Jonathan went and encouraged him to stay strong in his faith in God. To stay strong in his faith in God. That's what Jonathan went there to do. Can you imagine? Maybe you can, and maybe you can't. Imagine a friend that would go completely out of their way, one way or another, to encourage you in a time of need, to still find your strength in God. If you have had a friend like that, or if you do know of somebody who would do that for you, then you know that kind of friendship. And if you don't, then you can only take a deep breath and imagine what it would be like. But I encourage you to find and to seek that individual. That's how special that is. Someone who will not just encourage you. You can get all kinds of people to applaud for you. Good job. Like what I see. But what about somebody in your time of need that does that? Maybe that's you for somebody else. That's the other side of that coin. Do you know that person? Can you be that person? He went to find David, his friend, and encourage him to stay strong in his faith in God. I mean, I just can't get over that. Now, your King James Version says to strengthen his hand in God. Okay? That's still right up the same alley. Your NIV version, if that's what you're reading, said to help him find his strength in God. All of them say the same thing. He went to find his friend and help his friend renew and keep his faith in God. That is awesome. I don't know where you are spiritually right now, but because you're here, you must be seeking. You must want to be building your relationship with God. How awesome would it be to have a friend who sought you out, and don't miss this part, in your time of deepest need and encouraged you to stay strong in your faith. How great would that be? When that happened, you would know. You would know. It's huge and it's precious. I've had the blessing of having some people in my life's journey, men and women, who molded and shaped me spiritually. Spiritually. That's how it happens sometimes. We don't have a lot of those, usually. The fact is, without a doubt, without those people, I most certainly would not be here. I can say that. I wrote that, and I can say that. Honestly, probably wouldn't even be in the building. I'll just be perfectly honest. I probably wouldn't be in the building. I've shared the story about how Julie's influence got me in. But all due respect to my beautiful wife of 26 years, she probably wouldn't have kept me here. Not her by herself. My strong will, I would have found a way to justify the fact that I didn't need to go all the time. That was just kind of her thing. She needed it. I didn't need that. I'm telling you right now, that's exactly what I would have said. And I made a short list myself, came up with about 6 names that came right to mind that helped me spiritually. That was before my days here. I didn't even know many of you at that point, these days that I'm thinking of right now. And now my list would be larger. 2 of those 6 people that I listed have gone on to be with the Lord. But their influence remains. I've known, and I've had several, we talked about this at Bible study on Wednesday, ministers and preachers in my life. Those that I've known since my life in ministry now. Those that I knew as, you remember, my pew sitting days. Of all the ministers that I've had, only one made the list. Not that my list is special. I'm not saying my list is special. You have your list. I'm just saying spiritual influences come from everywhere. Don't think you're out of the realm of spiritual influence in someone's life because you're not in ministry. Oh, yes, you are. Because without those people, I would not be here. I would not be anywhere that I am in my life spiritually. Because the title of minister or preacher is a worldly thing. Yes, I am held more accountable to God because of my position, but that doesn't mean that you don't have influence. My title means nothing in what we do. Craig Groeschel, one of my ministers that I read quite a bit with Craig, he tells a story from his ministry, a story about people in need of spiritual friends, of the guidance and the friendship that we've been talking about. And it has to be a true friendship, as we've talked. One is not greater than the other. And Craig tells a story about meeting a professional, someone that was at the top of their game. Now, Craig didn't share whether it was a professional in the business world or whether it was a professional athlete. With Craig, it could be either, really. But he talked about this man that he met. And the guy was as successful as he could possibly be in the career that he had. Couldn't be more successful in that career. But he was falling apart in his personal life. So Craig asked him, who do you have in your life that encourages you spiritually? Who do you have in your life that encourages you spiritually? He says the man was holding back tears. Craig said the look in his eye, you would have thought I asked him, who flies you over the moon in your personal spaceship? The guy was just, he had no clue how to answer that question. And the man said, I don't have any idea what that guy would look like, but I'd love to talk to him. Craig had someone in mind, and he told him, your story is about to change. I have a friend I will introduce you to that will change your destiny. So he hooked them up, and they're currently meeting together. So who helps you find strength in God? Who helps you? Who is your iron? Remember last week we talked about the proverb, iron sharpens iron. Who is your iron? Maybe it's your turn. Maybe it's my turn to step in for someone. Because doing life alone without friendship, it isn't a sign of strength. It isn't a sign of strength. I wouldn't have been a stronger person by saying, I don't need these spiritual people in my life. I'm just fine on my own. I can't even imagine now how much weaker I would be in all aspects of my life without that. Honestly, I can't even imagine it. Seeking friendship and help is a sign of wisdom. It's a sign of wisdom. Certainly not weakness. So as we go through this series, as we go through this time in our lives, and we talk and we think about the people that have been friends to us, or that we need to be friends to, we need to seek, to cherish, to be grateful for to pray for friends like Jonathan was to David, who will help us find strength in God. That's something that has absolutely infinite value and will shape your life. I pray that I find that even more, that I am that, and that you do too. It's that important in our journeys. Will you pray with me? Our God and our Father, we thank you. We thank you for your word, for the stories, the unbelievable stories that it tells us. And Father, many of us have heard the story of David and Jonathan and their friendship and where it began and how it was nurtured. But sometimes, Father, we miss those verses, those single lines that tell us so much about what true friendship is. About someone that goes out of their way to be a true spiritual guide and friend in our lives. We thank you and we pray for strength. Strength for those that will offer that spiritual help to us. And strength for us to step up and be that friend too. And Father, help us to always know that Jesus is our best friend. As we go through this life, as we learn from each other, may we share in your words and your ways. For it's in Christ's name that we pray. Amen.